Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, welcome along on tonight's Mark Steyn Show, live on your telly and on your wireless. We have Lawrence Fox, Loza, Louis Mem on free speech and Islam. Plus, how often does a parish council clerk go viral? Jackie Weaver did.
You have no authority here, Jackie Weaver.
She's just kicked him out.
Read the standing orders. Read them and understand them.
Millions and millions watched that exchange on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's surely the biggest audience for any parish council meeting in world history. Well, Jackie Weaver is here tonight. Plus your thoughts live and in real time, so do send them along by email to gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. But remember to be as reserved and respectful as an English parish council meeting. All that after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. The top stories tonight. A damning report has found catastrophic errors at the Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital, saying 201 babies and 9 mothers could have survived if they'd received better care. The independent inquiry looked at more than 1,500 clinical instances and revealed repeated failures over a 20-year period. A number of babies suffered skull fractures and were left brain damaged, and several mothers were refused a caesarean section. The report highlighted a culture at the trust which meant some midwives were too frightened to involve consultants. Health Secretary Sajid Javid says the failures have no place in the NHS.
To all the families that have suffered so greatly, I am sorry. The report clearly shows that you were failed by a service that was there to help you and your loved ones to bring life into this world. We will make the changes that the report says are needed at both a local and national level.
Sajid Javid. Well, Sonia Lee, whose baby daughter died in 2000 shortly after birth, says she's waited too long for an apology.
All I ever wanted was somebody to say, I am sorry, I made the mistake, and I will retrain and I will learn from my mistakes, and I never want this to happen again.
Sonia Lee. The Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, says he'll appeal a parole board decision to release the mother of baby P from prison. Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son Peter at her home in London. He'd suffered more than 50 injuries despite being on the at-risk register. The parole board cited Connolly's progress while in custody and time on licence as reasons for their decision. British ports will be given legal powers to refuse entry to ferry operators who don't pay the minimum wage. The Transport Secretary today laid out a package of measures in response to P&O Ferries' decision to sack 800 staff. Grant Shapps says his request to prevent entry to ferry services who don't pay fairly will be in force until the government makes it a legal requirement. The top United Nations human rights official has said Russia may have committed war crimes in Ukraine, and they urged Vladimir Putin to withdraw his troops. Michelle Bachelet said at least 77 medical facilities have been destroyed, including hospitals. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry says forces were regrouping near Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, and the northern city of Chernihiv in order to focus on occupied territories in the east. But Russian attacks in both locations continue today, according to military sources. The Hollywood actor Bruce Willis is stepping away from his career after being diagnosed with aphasia. In an Instagram post, his daughter confirmed the condition is impacting his cognitive abilities, and as such, he's decided to retire. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Mark Steyn.
Before anything else, I need to issue a correction. This is so embarrassing. In all my years as a professional broadcaster, I've never screwed up like this before. It's difficult, so if I start tearing up at the humiliation of it all, please bear with me and pretend it's just one of those cringe-making things like a Tory backbencher explaining why he crashed the car after a casual sex session arranged on the internet. Yesterday, right here, I said that the only Ukrainian song ever to win the Eurovision Song Contest was Jamala's unforgettable hit 1944. What a fool I am. Immediately, I was bombarded with sneering emails and derisive tweets demanding to know how I could have forgotten Ukraine's 2004 Eurovision winning song performed by Ruslana, Wild Dances. All together now.
You to want me as silence running, running down. Shit it you die, shit it you done, shit it you die, shit it you done. Forever and ever, go, wild dancing.
I want you to want me, so I dance round and round and round. Hey, shiddy die, shiddy rai die, dana. You think Vladimir Putin wants that on his border? It's an obvious CIA deep cover operation. That's Hunter Biden, third backup dancer on the left in the animal pelt bikini. Anyway, I blew it, got it wrong. Why would you pay any attention to what a guy says about inflation or vaccine side effects if he doesn't even know Ruslana won the 2004 Eurovision Song Contest? So I've turned myself into Ofcom and pleaded in mitigation that I'm transitioning into a Ukrainian backup dancer. So I'll be doing the rest of the show in Hunter Biden's animal pelt bikini just to make myself more credible. Ahead of that, the handover of Hong Kong to China in 1997 ended the Privy Council's role as the colony's ultimate court of appeal. In its place, a new court of final appeal was created, not a Chinese court of law, but a common law court in which currently 10 of the 21 judges are from the Commonwealth. They include a former Canadian Chief Justice, 2 former Australian Chief Justices, and various eminent English judges, all very reassuring that Hong Kong citizens would not be subject to the caprices of Chairman Xi's vision of justice, as the poor old Uyghurs are. Unfortunately, as part of his accelerated plan for world domination, Chairman Xi trashed the One Country, Two Systems agreement, imposed the same quote-unquote justice on Hong Kongers as the mainline Chinese enjoy, and sat back knowing that Her Britannic Majesty's government would do absolutely nothing about it. So now the Commonwealth blokes are a bit uncomfortable lending their full-bottomed wigs to the credibility of a commie tribunal, and 2 of them have now quit the court, Lord Reid and Lord Hodge. I've tried over the last few weeks to make the point that one of the biggest stories on the planet in this Platinum Jubilee year is the retreat of the British world in the face of Chinese aggression. It's a huge story that will impact how you and your children live. It's a hinge moment of history. And unfortunately, the alleged unipolar hyperpower of the new millennium, the United States, as Nigel was talking about just a few minutes ago, the alleged unipolar hyperpower is under the leadership of a rotting corpse, too busy stumbling off prompter and threatening to rain down World War III on Vladimir Putin. But in this Jubilee year, the Chinese are using their Belt and Road Initiative to snaffle up the Commonwealth island by island. On Monday's show, Her Majesty's former Press Secretary, Dickie Arbiter, pooh-poohed the accelerating demands to dethrone the Queen and said it was quite natural that Jamaica and the Bahamas and wherever's next should wish to, quote, go it alone. But they're not going it alone. They're becoming Chinese client states, and that is a tragedy and a disaster for the world. What do Liz Truss or Boris Johnson have to say about this? About as much as they have to say about the thousands of pseudo-refugees washing up on England's southern shore each week. The only difference being that the Chinese money washing up on small Commonwealth islands is far more purposeful. Like Tory MPs, the world is transitioning. In the Parliament of the Solomon Islands this week, they began the session with God Save the Queen and then moved forward with plans for a Chinese military base. Happy Jubilee. Let me know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk or via Twitter at gbnews. Alexandra Marshall joins us from the Australian end of the Spectator. She's been ahead of most commentators on this and was writing about the Solomon Islands situation last year. It's always good to see you, Alexandra. How does the Australian political class feel about a Chinese base in the Solomon Islands?
Well, they have been extremely naive about what was going to happen in the Pacific, in particular with the Solomon Islands. And so they ignored it for most of last year, and even in the last months of 2021. Australia's political class were ambivalent to what China was up to. And now that it's happened and the leaked security agreement between China and the Solomon Islands has been confirmed, all of a sudden Australia and New Zealand are very concerned about China's interest in Solomon Islands when they should have been concerned about it about 2 or 3 years ago, when China started making inroads into the Solomon Islands by bribing MPs of the Solomon Islands government and sending businessmen in there to out-compete the local Solomon Islands trade, which is what caused the riots at the end of 2021. So yes, as far as Australia is concerned, we're so slow off the mark. Our politicians haven't even really come to a decision yet about what they're going to do.
Now, Australia and New Zealand are supposed to be part of the Five Eyes security intelligence sharing agreement between the US and Her Majesty's Dominions, Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. When you've got Chinese missiles capable of hitting you very quickly, there's a possibility, is there not, that Australia could wind up as neutered a member of the Five Eyes as New Zealand has become?
Well, New Zealand has done that to itself on purpose. So the current leadership in New Zealand are pretty unreliable as far as being Five Eyes are concerned. But they have stepped back and they think their protection from conflicts in the Pacific is because China or any other threat will go after Australia, so they think it's safe. That's what's happened to New Zealand. But Australia has, by necessity, gone closer to the US and to Britain with our new AUKUS agreement. And so if anything's going to happen, we're going to become more involved, not less, because the American and British interests in the Pacific are condensing around Australia, particularly in the northern part of Australia. So yes, we're actually going to become more involved, not less.
Well, I'd be interested to see that. I'll just give you something from my own experience. I don't know whether you remember, if we go back into the dim mists of the past, when non-Australians were free to travel to your beautiful country, Alexandra. It's a long time ago. I can barely remember it myself. But going back a few years, I remember I'd come to Australia every couple of years and I'd give speeches hither and yon. I was in the old Senate, which is much nicer a building than the new Senate in Canberra, and most of the Australian cabinet were there. And I noticed something. I noticed that if you were rude about the Iranians or the French or the Saudis or the Belgians, everybody laughed. But when you started being rude about the Chinese, all the big shot Australian ministers of the Crown all went a bit silent and looked at their shoes. And it occurred to me that there was a feeling either that China was Australia's friend, or that regardless of how friendly it was, Australia's politicians had decided they had to make their accommodations with the Chinese. I don't really know which it is. What do you think it is?
I've just come from the hallways of Canberra and Parliament, and it's changed a little bit in regards to China now. So what happened before is there was so much money and business involved in China, and China had a program of taking our politicians out, and they would wine and dine them and take them on 5-star trips through Asia. There's a lot of reports now coming out of how many of those trips were not declared. And so the relationship between our politicians and China was founded basically in the fact they were treated like royalty. And that's why they never said anything, and that's why they went silent when they were worried about China. But now the existential threat of China, particularly taking control of Australian ports, like our port of Darwin is under a 99-year lease with China. This militarization and incursion in China, which the people have been unhappy about for a long time, is now impossible to ignore. And so politicians, regardless of their personal experiences with China or how much money is invested in China, they now can't ignore the fact that China is buying off the Pacific. It's buying off Taiwan by taking control of its friends, and it is making a military incursion closer and closer to Australia. So it's shifted dramatically. You won't find silence anymore in Canberra. You might find a few cold shoulders, but I think people have recognised the threat of China finally. Way too late, but they are getting there.
When you say way too late, I mean, as I said, we do have the weird situation now, which is in what is meant to be a sovereign island of Her Majesty the Queen, there will be a Chinese military base. What can Canberra or London or anybody else do about that? Because once it's done, it's a fait accompli, isn't it?
Well, the Solomon Islands gained their independence in 1978, and since then Australia has been trying to be a peacekeeping force to stabilise the government, because they have had issues internally. But and that's what happened last year. Australia tried to stabilise the government, but what they did this time is they quashed a rebellion against China's incursion into the government, which was a mistake.
Right.
But Australia has this problem. It's way too late. We've got
Just to make the point there, Alexandra, you made that point in your column in which you suggested that the Australian, in that rebellion in the Solomon Islands, that in effect the Australian government had picked the wrong side, that they'd gone in to shore up the pro-Chinese side.
That's exactly what they did. We sent troops and we sent military personnel. Australia, New Zealand, Fiji and PNG all sent troops in there to quash a rebellion against the government, that the people were rising up against Chinese incursion and all of the business transactions that were cutting off Taiwan, their biggest trading partner and longest friend there in the region. And Australia picked a winner, and they picked the Chinese-backed government, which I said was a mistake, and now they're learning, yes, it was definitely a mistake. But as far as too late, what I was going to say is our ports and our airports and our mining facilities and our farmland is Chinese owned by majority now in Australia. And so to unpick that infrastructural problem is going to take it's going to be very difficult for the Australian government to do that without offending China or sparking some kind of conflict, just to get our own military assets back.
Yeah, that's a tragedy. Well, thank you as always, Alexandra, and that was an excellent column you wrote, and it's a great pity that it's not you and instead Scott Morrison sitting there in power in Canberra, because you were more far-sighted about this than he and his colleagues were. We'll get to your... By the way, I should say, just on that Hong Kong court business, we did ask one of the Commonwealth judges on that court to come on and talk with us about it, about the issues that it involves for any principled judge sitting on a court that is increasingly controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And that, I won't name him out of embarrassment. He's a judge from the Commonwealth. Well, I'll say he's one of the English judges on that court, and he declined to come on because he didn't want to talk about it. Well, we're going to keep talking about it, and somebody needs to keep talking about it, because as I said, in this Jubilee year, the British world is in retreat all over the map. We'll get to your reaction next. GBViews at gbnews.uk. You can Twitter me at GBnews. We have Lawrence Fox, Anne-Elizabeth Moutet, and Jackie Weaver, the viral parish council clerk. Not a phrase the English language has ever had use for in the entirety of human history. Lots of fun stuff straight ahead. Stay with us.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, let's get to your thoughts. Fry says it would be helpful if the West stopped funding China. Yeah, actually, we're funding our own demise, because the only reason China has all this money to walk around the Solomon Islands and Sri Lanka and Uganda and everywhere else is because we gave them the money by buying cheap Chinese-made crap at crap, you like, because everything we have now is made in China. What was the old line from Stalin? The capitalists will sell us the rope with which we will hang them. We're even nuttier. We're actually paying China for the rope with which they're hanging us. Candy says globalization suits China. They have few natural resources. That's right. That's one reason they're buying up everywhere. That's why they bought up all the bauxite in Jamaica. That's why, as Alexandra was saying, they're buying up everything in Australia. They have no resources. So they have to sell their manufactured goods to us to survive. If the West became more self-sufficient and produced our own, oh, do you mean the way it was like in for most of human history? until those geniuses at the Chamber of Commerce in America decided that outsourcing the entirety of American manufacturing to China was a genius move. You're absolutely right, and Candy adds, doing this is much more important than tackling global warming. Yeah, here's a net zero for you, Boris. Net zero Chinese imports. Go for that. Net zero Chinese imports by 2025. I'll give you £5 if you're willing to do that, Mr. Prime Minister. John says the wisdom of Solomon wouldn't go amiss if Ukraine's daddy Zelensky could bring himself to give custody to Mother Russia rather than watch his NATO baby being split in two. There's no way you can hand the whole of Ukraine to Russia. They simply don't have the manpower to hold that state down. And although it's true that people get less anti-Russian the further east you go, they don't get that anti-Russian quick enough to make holding down the whole. If they seriously want to bring Mother Russia's border up to the Hungarian border and the Slovak border and the Polish border, that's going to be a tough job to do in this thing. Simon, oh, here we go. This problem started and has been growing ever since Nixon was president and Kissinger visited China. NATO and the West will pat themselves on the back with Russia's failure and use it as an excuse to ignore the continuing threat. Yeah, you know, I'd be much happy if Joe Biden's going to wander off prompter. I'd be much happier with him threatening global apocalypse over China than threatening it over Russia, because frankly, global apocalypse over Russia doesn't seem worth the effort. Doesn't seem worth the smoking craters and the mushroom clouds. Trevor, where's, you know, the cost-benefit analysis smoking craters and mushroom clouds vis-a-vis China is a slightly different calculation. Trevor says all we do about China is talk about China's rise. What we should be talking about is how to stop it. And one way is to bring back manufacturing to the UK, EU and US. China are slowly but surely dominating the world through the back door and without firing a shot by investing in other countries and essentially giving loans to all and sundry who will forever be in their debt. We're doomed. That's a good way of putting it, Trevor. In fact, the cost of decoupling from China and bringing manufacturing back to the Western world is relatively low compared to, say, the amount of money Boris Johnson is splashing around on aid to Afghanistan and Ukraine at the moment. It's very affordable. It does mean that people will have to get real. So if you go to Crap You Like and you like to buy their T-shirts because they're just tuppence 3 farthing or whatever they are now, you're going to have to pay a little. You might have to pay threepence 3 farthing for that T-shirt. But it'd be worth it to live in a free world as opposed to enriching a totalitarian dictatorship to the point where it's the #1 country on the planet. By the way, at the end of yesterday's show, a viewer asked me a question about a news story from last year that was in the air for a week or so, and then, as they do, it went away because it's evidently not as consequential or as Cakegate or how Will Smith reacts to jokes. But after the show, I gave it a bit of thought and figured, no, it's the first anniversary of this story, and like the Hong Kong judges and the Solomon Islands military base, it's a portent of the future. A year ago, a Yorkshire school teacher showed a representation of Mohammed, such as one finds in Dante's Inferno, illustrations by Blake and Doré, and indeed in a frieze at the US Supreme Court. But it's different in Batley, Yorkshire. So in 21st century England, a man has spent a year in hiding for the crime of blasphemy. Lawrence Fox is an eminent actor and founder of the Reclaim Party, and we're always glad to see him. Lawrence, you were one of the few people, in fact, to notice the first anniversary of this school teacher's fate. It's important, this story, isn't it?
Hi, Mark. Yes, I really think it is. It's the first anniversary of the teacher being remaining in hiding, and I think it's a very, very sad reflection of where we are as a country. On the 25th of March in 2021, the Purpose of Life charity called Mohammed Hussein called the teacher a terrorist, and then in April 2021, the Joe Cox Foundation donated £1,000 to his charity. So essentially in England, we are living under a blasphemy law, which we don't need to live under. This is not part of liberal, secular Western democracy. So I think it's awful, and especially given with what Michael Gove said today, is like we're talking about anti-Muslim hatred. I'm like, what about this poor teacher that is locked in hiding because Sharia law is being imposed upon our country? I think it's a very, very sad day for our country as an anniversary. And as far as months are concerned, you've got Black History Month, you've got Pride Month, you've got everything in months. What about Batley Teacher Month? That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, actually. I remember thinking, 5 years ago with the Charlie Hebdo thing, all these people holding candles and wearing lapel pins, Je suis Charlie and all that. And in the end, they were not prepared, though, to defend the editors of Charlie Hebdo's right to publish Mohammed cartoons. And I thought that was fairly ridiculous. But this time round with this school teacher, it's almost as if they didn't even bother doing the Je suis Batley type stuff. They just shoveled it all under the carpet as if this incremental surrender is too embarrassing to discuss anymore.
I agree. I think it's. I think Jordan Peterson reminded us of this back in the day, which is identity politics works both ways, and one of the problems of identity politics is that white people are going to resist. The Islam. It's difficult to explain, isn't it? Because everyone's diverting themselves into groups, but. The problem here is that this charity has donated money, having named the teacher and called him a terrorist, that we are now sat here and we're going, are we looking at equality, and are we looking at what's best for our country, or are we looking at what I would call anti-white racism? And I think it ties into what Will Smith did the other day, which is he slapped someone on stage. So I have friends who are comedians, I have friends who are gay, and I have friends who are, I actually weirdly, I get to tick all the boxes here. I've got an albino black friend, and we're having this conversation. It's very, very difficult. So what we need to do is we need to stop talking about skin color. It's not interesting. It doesn't matter to people. No one cares. And je suis Charlie, je suis everything, je suis Ukraine. It doesn't mean anything. What matters is that this man with his family is sat in hiding. I spoke to this man. I spoke to him, and he's been offered tens of thousands of pounds to speak to everybody. And I've spoken to him, and he doesn't even want people to know how many kids he has because he's so scared of what will happen to him. Samuel Paty had his head cut off, chopped off by a Muslim extremist terrorist. And we need to genuinely have a conversation about anti-white racism, and we need to go, this is a real thing. This man, people are having their heads cut off, stadiums are being bombed, but we're not allowed to show a picture of the Prophet Muhammad. And today you've had a thing of a school where they have said they've suspended a teacher because that teacher has had a mug with a picture of Jesus on one side going, yo, and Muhammad on the other side going, yo. And we live in a liberal, secular democracy. So my plea to the British people is to understand that white British people are under attack directly under attack from those that wish us ill. And, and that comes from a place of deep sadness for me, because I love people, and I think it's awful that we divide ourselves down skin color lines, but identity politics works both ways.
Well, when you say that, there is a contradiction between all this, celebrate diversity, the vibrancy of diversity, LGBT, QWERTY, I don't know how many letters they got stuck. You can never have enough letters stuck at the end. The more diverse we are, the better, except that the strictures of Islam now apply to 100% of people living in the country. So if a particular religion says you can't draw our prophet, that applies not just to followers of the prophet, but to all 7.5 billion people on the planet.
My father would say, so if I took my father to the park with my kids, my father and my kids went Jesus Christ. If they missed a goal, if they were trying to score a goal, or they stubbed their toe, my father would say, do not take the Lord's name in vain. And I would defend my kids against my father in their right to blaspheme against the Christian God. And we are living in a country now where we need to understand that we are under attack. It's an attack that we're under now. And we have to find a peaceful way of dealing with it. But just to put into context here, on the 25th of March, Purpose of Life founder Mohammed Hussein called the Batley teacher a terrorist. That's what he did on social media. He put his face on social media and he called him a terrorist. And on the 22nd of April 2021, the Joe Cox Foundation. Now, we all understand what happened to Joe Cox, and that is an appalling crime against her and her family and humanity. They donated £1,000. This is corruption on an unbelievable scale. And I, for one, and I know this is controversial and I'm sorry for being this way, but I am sick to the core of anti-white racism in this country. I am very, very, very tolerant. Our country is very, very tolerant, but I am sensing within the community of, the people I speak to who are left, right, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. I'm sensing a real thing of like, hang on a minute, guys, calm down. This is not right. Yeah. And I had a good conversation with Audley Harrison and some guy who was eating popcorn last night. But we have to not look at things through the lens of colour of skin. God gave us equality before him, and that's how it is. I'm so beholden in sadness for this.
No, you're right to draw attention to that, Lawrence, because if you want to provoke a white racial identity movement en masse, then doing things like this to this school teacher is the way you're going to wind up with one. Thank you very much for that, Lawrence Fox, the founder of the Reclaim Party, and a man who I'm sure in happier times would much rather be on stage or screen because he's a terrific actor too. President Macron was not happy when Joe Biden wandered off prompter and threatened to rain down chemical weapons on Russia in order to force regime change. Oh, don't worry, he just misspoke. So that's okay, could happen to anyone. But Monsieur Macron is the only G7 leader still speaking to Putin as we approach the first round of the French presidential election. And Elisabeth Moutet, the doyenne des analystes parisiens, joins me, and we're always glad to see her. The last time we talked, I thought this getting on the phone to Putin thing was rather was working out for Macron, but I notice a few pieces now saying that we may have written off Marine Le Pen far too soon, and even a couple of polls suggesting she's doing far better than before the whole Ukraine thing started.
Yes, and that is rather surprising in many ways, because you have a majority of the French who are still very concerned about Ukraine and find the bombing of cities, of hospitals, of shelters something outrageous. But at the same time, you have a proportion of people in France, about 20%, 21% exactly, who follow the Putin thesis. NATO provoked Russia just by hinting that possibly in 10 years' time, Ukraine could become a member of NATO, and Russia was only defending herself, etc., etc. And Marine Le Pen supporters, as well as the extreme left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon, they're both the ones who are the most pro-Putin in the country. Also, Eric Zemmour followers, slightly less. And there's a disconnect between that and the fact that for everything else, she has been actually leading a rather good campaign, and the presence of a third candidate, Eric Zemmour, who came out of nowhere, he was a columnist for Le Figaro for years, shows her in a more moderate style than he does, so that in the end, she's beginning to connect with the voters and with a great deal of efficiency. She's been very good. She was humiliated 5 years ago when she ran against the newcomer Emmanuel Macron. She was unable to make good arguments during a television debate, and she's been working very hard at that. And she stuck to the idea that she would bring her party, the Rassemblement National, she called it a rally rather than call it a front, national front. But the whole point was to bring it closer to the center. And for a long time, people thought, look, if you want to vote to the center, you've got plenty of candidates, including the president. But the discontent with the president is such that she now is polling well. The polls right now give her, one poll gave her 43 to 57 to Macron, and another poll taken the same day gave her 47 to 53 Macron, which is now within the margin of error of her being possibly electable. This is about the runoff, the second round on 24th of April, and it is really surprising.
Yeah, I suggested to you a few months ago that I thought Madame Le Pen had over-moderated herself, that she'd moved too far to the centre and opened up this space for Zemmour, whereas right now it looks as if she's actually calculated a pretty sweet spot to be in a week and a half before the election.
I think yes, and it's very interesting because there's not just calculation. I think it's a mood of the country. It's fascinating that you've got about 60% of the voters who express a desire to get rid of the president. You've got about 31% who say, no, I'd rather vote for him as a vote for him rather than a vote against somebody else. And you still have a sort of unknown center and unknown fringes. But she seems to have just plowed her furrow for a long time, and right now it looks like it's what people want.
Yes, that's very interesting. And I guess the question after the first round is, when the other fellas are knocked out, how many of them then say, oh, vote for Macron to keep out Le Pen, as they did with Chirac and Le Pen 20 years ago. But we already know, I think, that Monsieur Mélenchon isn't going to recommend voting for Macron, is he?
No, and he's gone up in a very interesting way because he looks to the French left as the only candidate who's going to score something. They still are saying within his campaign that he can make it to the second round. I think that is a pie in the sky. He's a kind of Corbyn French answer. It's very interesting. You've got people like Ségolène Royal, who was the presidential candidate in 2007 and who is not really a sort of hard leftist. She's not a Corbyn character, but she's somebody with an eye to the main chance, and she wants to be there when the French left sort of rises up from the shattered debris that it is right now, and she wants to have a spot. That's the most important thing for her. And she says she will support Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is an unreconstructed Marxist.
Right. All I'll say is that if after Her Majesty the Queen's reign, if these ghastly British Republicans get their way and end the monarchy, I hope we have the French presidential system, not the American one, because it provides for a lot more liveliness along the way. Thank you, as always, Anne Elizabeth. Great to see you, and we shall count down the days. Stump the Steins coming up. Ask me anything. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And from the world's only viral parish council, what a concept. Jackie Weaver is here. Don't touch that dial. We're coming right back.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
One of the worst aspects of the COVID prison state has been the rise of Zoom. The Zoom call has supplanted almost all other forms of human communication. We have business meetings by Zoom and even trials by Zoom. A poor fella in Singapore became the first man in the history of common law to be sentenced to death by Zoom. I haven't watched it because I don't like to think of the judge putting the black cap on top of his wig, knowing that he's probably wearing his pajama bottoms underneath his robes as he's zooming in the death sentence from his spare room. But Zoom also made stars of Handforth Parish Council in Cheshire. I'm sure you'll remember Jackie Weaver acting either as clerk or the, quote, proper officer, claiming she had the authority to kick the chairman out of the meeting.
That this meeting has not been called according to the law. The law has been broken.
It has been properly
Will you
called.
please let the chairman
Mrs. Weaver, please.
speak?
If you disrupt this meeting, I will have to remove you from it. You can't.
It's only the chairman who can remove people from a meeting. You have no authority here, Jackie Weaver. No authority at all.
She's just kicked him out. Just a minute. No, she's kicked him out. Don't. She's kicked him out. Don't. This is a meeting called by two councillors. Illegally? They now elect a chairman.
No, they can't because the vice chair's here. I take charge. Read the standing orders. Read them and understand them.
Millions saw that exchange. If the Oscars had the ratings of Handforth Parish Council, they wouldn't need gimmicks like nominees punching the host's lightouts. But after the meeting, there were investigations and reports, 6 of them running to more than 145 pages. This is just one of them in very small typeface too. It gave me a headache trying to read it. After all those reports, investigators concluded that Jackie Weaver did not, in fact, have the authority to boot the chairman off that Zoom call. It says, faced with what were unusual and difficult circumstances and the deep-seated issues underpinning those circumstances, we can understand why Jackie Weaver acted as she did, despite her action being without any formal footing in terms of appropriate process and procedure. Jackie Weaver joins me now. Jackie, how do you feel about the determination of these various investigative reports that you didn't have the authority for what you did?
I feel okay about them. Don't forget, I have had the opportunity, because I was one of the people involved in the investigation, of having seen the report before it was actually issued. And actually, I feel really comfortable with it because it's true. I mean, it says that there was no formal footing for the actions that I took. Well, yeah, there weren't, because at the time, there were no amended standing orders or no formal guidance on how you manage a virtual meeting. So we were all doing the best we could in difficult situations.
So to a certain extent, you're a bit like that judge in Singapore passing his death sentence. When you're doing things on Zoom, it all gets a bit loosey-goosey simply because everybody's improvising their way through these virtual meetings. But what I found interesting reading the reports, there's some...
I don't agree with that. I don't think it was at all loose. But I think we always, in terms of presenting the information, I think you always have to kind of balance between actually going through it line by line and detail by detail and just accepting that some of it will be misunderstood. And does it really matter in the bigger picture? So that many of the things, like the chairman saying I had no authority there, absolutely true. But I wasn't claiming to have any authority there. I wasn't claiming I was clerk. I wasn't claiming I was proper officer. He just kept telling me I wasn't.
What's the difference between a clerk and the, as he put it, the proper officer?
Most clerks are the proper officer of the council. But in larger councils, you can sometimes divvy up the post, if you like. So some responsibilities will be given to the proper officer and some will be given to the clerk. But 99% of our councils fall below that threshold, including Handforth.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. The other thing I found interesting about reading this report, by the time I got to page 47 or whatever it was, is after he's made his decision, he gets this irate phone call from one of those involved saying, call me back within half an hour or I'm calling the coppers on you. Is this in any sense, you're on the association of, I think it's the Association of Parish Clerks of Cheshire, or is this the normal level of passion at a parish council environment?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say it was passion, and secondly, I wouldn't say it was normal. But one of the criticisms of the process is, in fact, that it cost £85,000, and oh my God, what a lot of money that is. But again, a misunderstanding is that it was £85,000 to investigate that meeting. That's not the case at all. £85,000 did include part of that meeting, but was mainly the complaints that had come in over the previous year. And part of the reason that it took so long to investigate was because the 3 people who were under investigation did not cooperate with the investigator.
So in fact, that's what made it so. What's the underlying cause of what's going on here? Because what people liked about that video is that when the guy says, understand the standing orders, when he's yelling that at you, it's that you keep thinking, wow, I'd love to see this in the House of Commons. I'd love to see something like this at a G7 meeting. I'd love to see Macron and Boris Johnson going on. What's actually the underlying cause of the investment in what's going on here?
I mean, clearly, this issue did not start with this meeting. And I think it's one of those things that parish councils, by their nature, are parochial. They're very, very local. And that means that it's easy for people to get very passionate about what it is that's being discussed. And I think sometimes what happens is that we end up simply with a power struggle. And that, I think, is what we saw played out that night. The power struggle, incidentally, between me and them, it was actually between the two factions within the parish council. My job as a facilitator initially at the meeting was just to make the meeting happen.
Yes, that's right. In fact, you didn't really, in that sense, have a dog in the fight. You were there as the person who was meant to mediate between these factions, which is again what makes it. What makes it even stranger. I saw your promo for your appearance tonight on GB News that you did a few hours ago, and as a kind of paddle chair, I thought maybe they should have Jackie on and get rid of Michelle Dewberry on Dubes & Co. and have Jackie moderating one of these paddle shows. I mean, is it something, after what happened to you, do you just want to steer clear of this stuff again, or do you actually quite enjoy it in the end?
I think you're definitely making a good case for my needing an agent. But no, I mean, a few years ago, I did do two things. I qualified as a counsellor, as in someone who counsels others, not but also as a mediator. Because I do think, again, going back to that parochial nature of those councils, it's very easy for tempers to get frayed. And sometimes it does need someone coming in from outside to find some mid-ground for them.
Well, as I said, I found that very interesting, that promo you did, and maybe you should. You've got actually a book out, haven't you? What's the title of the book?
The title of the book is, although we may have to revise it, You Do Have the Authority Here, but also it's actually up for an award, believe it or not. It is shortlisted, although
really?
to be honest, it is quite a long shortlist. For the business book of the year.
Well, you do have it. We still have nominally free speech in the United Kingdom, so you do have the authority to write a book called You Do Have the Authority. Congratulations on that, Jackie. Thank you for not kicking me off the show. You certainly have the authority to self-expel yourself from the airwaves. In our closing moments, let's go stumping. Tom says, why are we not sanctioning Trudeau over his treatment of the Queen's subjects? This is the Canadian Prime Minister's use of the Emergency Act. You know, the only person, until the Duke of Edinburgh's memorial, the only person of consequence the Queen has seen in the last 6 months was her Canadian Prime Minister, and that's a very odd, even her Prime Minister in London she only sees via Zoom. That's a very odd honour to accord him. Liza says, Mark, what do you think of Disney making half of its characters to look like minorities of the LGBTQ community? I'm done with Disney, totally, far too... listen, Liza, they've always overemphasised minority communities. Have you ever seen Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? That's way too many dwarves. They're totally overrepresented there. Candy says, you've written about the West's demographic decline. Given our falling fertility rates, is the government turning a blind eye to immigration in order to keep our population up? We're going to talk about this in the days ahead, but if you stop having babies, you don't have a country, and you can never bring in enough migrants to make up for it, even if you have the shores of England open. That'll do it for me. Never fear, Dan Wootton's going to give it some Wednesday welly for 2 swinging groovy hours. Stay safe, stay free.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Rain and snow is currently clearing south across the UK, followed by cold Arctic winds and the risk of icy patches first thing Thursday. This cold front is bringing a marked change with Arctic air following south and in some places temperatures dropping more than 10 Celsius compared with a few days ago. It's also bringing a mixture of rain and hill snow, with the snow increasingly coming to lower levels across southeast England as it clears during the early hours of Thursday. Don't be surprised in the southeast, particularly if you're somewhere like the Chilterns or the Downs, to wake up to a slushy covering of snow. Won't last long though, and in the north we've already seen some snow and it will continue through the night with some icy patches first thing. A widespread frost to begin the day, temperatures well below freezing for some clearer and more sheltered parts of northern UK, and actually plenty of bright weather first thing once any remaining persistent rain and snow clears away from the far southeast. There'll be further wintry showers, sleet, snow, hail into the east of England, northern and eastern Scotland on a biting northeasterly wind, and it's going to feel cold in that wind. Temperatures at best 6 to 8 Celsius fairly widely. But there'll also be sunny spells away from the showers, particularly in the west. And a heads up, with clearing skies on Thursday evening, a really good chance actually of seeing the aurora, especially if you live in the north. But it's going to be a freezing night under those clear skies. Still some wintry showers into the east first thing Friday, further showers into the northwest as well. But away from those showers, sunshine and temperatures at or below freezing. Soon enough, though, it will warm up through Friday morning into the afternoon, temperatures reaching 8 to 9 Celsius quite widely. There'll be further showers, but not quite as many as Thursday, and it won't be quite as windy. Saturday brings with it further showers, drier for many on Sunday and a little warmer.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.